I'm going to go into a literary segment here real quick. And during the month of October, I picked up this book, How to Survive a Horror Movie. And it's actually really cool. It's got a bunch of great illustrations in it. It's like the book's written in such a way as like you're stuck in a horror movie and you find this book. Some lessons to survive and not get killed. Cool little book for $15. The illustrations I'm going to say is what make it worthwhile. And it was actually done by the guy who did Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Cool book. Check it out. I happened to find this at a record store, a local record store in Broad Ripple, which, speaking of Broad Ripple, you're going to see some snippets from the Broad Ripple Zombie Walk here soon. If not before this comes out, then at the same time, if not after. Hidden lyrics of the left hand. These are the unpublished lyrics of Glenn Danzig's, all of his bands, from The Misfits, Salwin, or Sam Hain as some people call it, and Danzig. All illustrations in this book were done by Simon Bisley, a longtime Danzig collaborator. Great illustrations. The lyrics are great, of course. This is definitely a great addition if you're a Sam Hain, Danzig, or Misfits fan, just for the illustrations alone. I'm going to go into the realm of pre-code horror again. I've already mentioned this book, the Mammoth Book of best horror comics, and the Mammoth Book of zombie comics. I don't believe any of the comics in this particular collection are pre-code horror, but there's some pre-code horror comics in this collection. I'm not going to talk about those too much because I've got much cooler things to talk about, even though those are really cool books worth checking out. But there's some new releases that are just as good, if not better, in my opinion. This is a book that I've had for a while but haven't talked about. It's Witchcraft. It's a bunch of pre-code horror comics, I believe, I think Witchcraft was one of the horror comics, pre-code horror comics, and it's a bunch of comics from that series. And the one I'm getting ready to talk about right now is not pre-code horror. It's been published, and in fact, you can even see on the covers inside of this that the Comics Code Authority stamp is on them. So these are not by any means pre-code horror, but they are horror comics that managed to work with the horror code. They're a lot like the old EC and pre-code horror comics, except a little more tame by standards of, the Comics Code of Authority to be able to comply with that. These are great, even though they're, tamed down a little bit. Great visuals, great imagery. Like there's one where there's like a robed figure rowing in a body of water in a casket. I think that's what makes these great, is the imagery. Just look at the front cover. I mean, the front cover says a lot right there. Great horror comics, even through the Comics Code of Authority. And now we're really going to start to get in the fun stuff. This book has been mentioned in Morgue, Four Color Fear. It had just recently come out. I actually picked this book up when I was in Chicago at a really cool comic shop. There in Chicago on Clark Street, there's a store called The Alley, which puts Hot Topic to shame. It's got a bunch of great clothes and punk and goth and industrial clothing, accessories, jewelry, whatever you want. So I definitely recommend checking out The Alley if you're in Chicago. But if you walk less than a block up, there is a comic book shop on the same street, on Clark Street. And they have a ton of comics, ton of toys. It was a cool comic shop, the coolest one that I saw when I was there. And this particular book right here, I found it there. It's Four Color Fear, which was mentioned in Rue Morgue, as I said. And it's got a bunch of pre-code horror comics in it in color. And it's got like a cover gallery. These are some great horror comics that they compiled in color, that they've cleaned up. And the cover art is from the comic The Corpse that Came to Dinner, or The Corpse Who Came to Dinner. Really cool comic strip, or comic book. You can see it there, The Corpse That Came to... The Corpse That Came to Dinner. Cool comic. There's also another one here called Custodian of the Dead, about an undertaker who or grave digger who is stealing from the corpses. Great classic pre-code horror comedies where the bad guys get their comeuppance and their preachies and whatnot. Great pre-code horror comics. And at the same comic book store, they had this, the Horror, which is a lot like Four Color Fear. In fact, between the Mammoth Book of Best Horror Comics, Four Color Fear, and this book, there is some overlap on some of the comics, but who cares? There's still plenty of other great horror comics in here and cover art, and this is stuff that you don't see every day. I love this stuff. The thing that makes this one cool is in the back. There's a DVD of an old newscast done in the 50s about horror comics and about how they're making juveniles delinquent. It's actually pretty shocking, and it was nice to see that because it's nice to see that a lot of the terror tactics that the news uses nowadays hasn't changed, and probably won't go away anytime soon. This is another great addition to the horror comics library, even with the overlap, because the DVD, the cover art is different. Some of it is. It even goes into some of the EC stuff. Four Color Fear focuses on the non-EC publishers, whereas this focuses on all the pre-code comics, EC and beyond, horror comics, crime comics. I think one of the biggest draws to this one is just the cover art. On top of having some great pre-code horror comics that aren't in some of the other ones, but like the covers for Dark Mysteries. I love the cover for Dark Mysteries. I have a feeling if I would have been around when it was published, that probably would have been one of my favorites. Like I like this one right here, which is about the cover's about a couple of skeletons that had died from eating poison meat from a butcher. They're hanging the butcher next to his poison meat and getting ready to kill him. And that's kind of there's an EC comic that I know of called Taint the Meat, It's the Humanity, which is a similar story where butchers selling tainted meat to customers and they start dying. If you're a fan of horror comics, definitely recommend picking up Cut. If you're a fan of horror comics, I definitely recommend picking up Four Color Fear and the Horror. Great pre-code horror comics fun for everyone. I mentioned Chicago a few times, and it was cool to see Chicago around Halloween time and the Halloween shops in Chicago and stuff like that. A great Chicago horror artist, and this kind of ties everything together. He's a big horror movie fan, a big horror fan in general. He's someone I'd like to work with in the future on a t-shirt design, possibly. And he's a great horror artist, horror fan. He loves horror movies. He likes horror comics. It's evident in his style. He calls himself after Ingalls from EC, who had the nickname Ghastly. I mentioned him a couple times before. He's a great horror artist. His website is www.putridgore.com. And I'm actually going to show you the front page here. And this is the front page of Putrid Gore art. www.putridgore.com. Definitely check out this website. He's got a bunch of great art up there. And he has some t-shirts available. He has some t-shirts available now. I actually bought one of the Paul Naschy t-shirts off of him at the Horror Hound convention where I saw him at. Great artist, definitely worth checking out. Again, the website is www.putridgore.com, and you should see the website address probably down here somewhere, at least a couple of times. Amazing artist, worth checking out his stuff. I'm probably going to keep plugging him here because he's very grassroots like me, and those. I'm probably going to plug him some more because he's very grassroots, much like me, and I want to get his name out there because he really deserves recognition, I feel. He's a great horror artist, which I keep saying, and you got to check out his artwork. And that's all that I have for this edition of Uberdemon's Movie Morgue. Again, I apologize for the lapse, and I hope to do this more frequently. Christmas is coming soon, so there should probably be another episode around then. There's a lot of movies that have come out around the month of October and that are going to come out soon that I don't have yet, and I hope to get soon. Keep watching. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this Halloween going overtime. There might be some other stuff in the works yet. It just depends on how much time I have. I hope you enjoyed this installment. This 21st episode of Uberdemon's Movie Morgue. See you next time on YouTube. Stay tuned.